It is August 29th, 2025, and all eyes will be on China in the coming days as you have more than 20 world leaders gathering for the latest Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. That includes Indian Prime Minister Modi with his first trip to China in 7 years, as he is set to sit down with Chinese President Xi Jinping, because it appears that India has realized that it's time to start working on mending ties with China. That's also coming in the face of major tensions with the US, as you have Trump doubling tariffs on India over their purchase of Russian oil. So, what does all of this mean for the global economy, for stability of the global South, and the ways in which they are working to unite together in the face of unprecedented tensions with the US? Well, we got into all of the latest with the special guest earlier, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Carl Zaw, a geopolitical analyst and host of the Silk and Steel podcast. Carl, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm glad that I get a chance to talk to you today. I know that there is a lot going on, but I want to start with a preview of this upcoming summit because, of course, Indian Prime Minister Modi is set to return to China for the first time in over 7 years, as he is one of more than 20 world leaders scheduled to gather for a summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization this weekend. And I know that some people see this as very significant. Other people are just kind of like, yeah, it's happening. So, how do you see the significance of, Xi, Modi, Putin, all of these other world leaders coming together, the global South uniting in a way, especially given all of the ongoing tensions with the US?
Well, I think it's significant in this given moment when Trump is basically waging a trade war against the rest of the world. This is when the alternative to the U.S. dominant international system is seen as necessary. So we have BRICS, which Trump deemed as anti-American alliance, and then we have SCO. So the BRICS is the Economic Cooperation Forum. SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is more security focused. And it was originally started by Russia and China, with neighboring countries start joining in. So now India, both India and Pakistan, interestingly, are in SCO, but also Iran. So now all these, what US will probably call, axis of evil is now in this organization. And I'm sure they're gonna discuss potential cooperation in terms of security. But very important event is Indian Prime Minister Modi is going to have a side bilateral meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. And this is the first time in 7 years Modi has visited China, especially after the very deadly 2020 border clash between the two countries. And India right now is trying to repair its relationship with China, given that Trump has been really putting squeeze on them over the purchasing of Russian oil. And I think India and China has both recognized that it's counterproductive and a big distraction for their priorities to keep this border tension going. So there's a strong desire on both sides to normalize the relationship, to bring it back on track before the 2020 border clash. Those negotiations has been well underway because all these meetings has been scheduled well in advance. With all, including SCO, that this was scheduled way before Trump did his tariff war and start slapping India with extra sanctions. So, but I think what Trump did is give it more impetus. It gave India a big push in the direction of normalization of ties with China, because for India, US is India's number one trade partner. China is its number two trade partner. And what India and China has done so far is they have agreed to resume direct flight, which has been suspended since COVID. And China has opened up border access for the Indian religious pilgrims to Mount Kailash in Tibet. And India also promised to lift trade restrictions on particularly Chinese investment into the country, because since the 2020 border clash, India has severely curtailed the Chinese investment into India tech sector, for example. And India was also the first country to ban TikTok. This is where U.S. Congress got their idea, banning TikTok. So now India is trying to lure back the Chinese investment into India, given what Trump is doing right now, slapping 50% tariff on India for its purchase of Russian oil. Because what India pursue is what they call the strategic autonomy. They try to, India is both a member of the Quad, which is basically the U.S. anti-China alliance, but also India is founding member of the BRICS. So for India, it's trying to broaden its options, and what U.S. has done is trying to limit India's maneuver room. Like for a long time, India felt okay. The best way is try to uh, maintain ties with both camps so it can get the best deal out of both sides. But as we well know, Rachel, US have no partners or allies. US have only vassals. And what Trump has done is bring in a fresh air of honesty to the US foreign policy. So, no more talks from Biden and Obama era of building partnership. Now Trump just want everyone to come to Washington, bend the knee, and kiss the ring. And for India, that's unacceptable because India sees itself as a great power. It does not want to be like a pawn of U.S. on a grand chessboard. India does not want to be Ukraine, right? India is not going to sacrifice itself, bleed for America on the front lines to fight against China. India will always watch out for its own strategic priorities. In this way, I have more respect for Indian leadership than the European leaders. Because, did you see that picture of all these EU leaders who are just sitting around like school children and waiting to be scouted by Trump? And right now when Trump says jump, and all the European leaders says how high. So India actually had a strong pushback against this U.S. attempt to subjugate them to U.S. strategic priorities, because for India, its traditional friendship with Russia is very important. India has a very long-standing ties with Russia, dating back to the days of Cold War. Because during the Cold War, India was basically aligned with Soviet Union, and that friendship carried over in the post-Cold War period. India continued to source, a lot of energy from Russia, oil, gas, and as well as weapon system. Now, what Trump wants, he wants India to cut off the Russia tie and turn to buy weapons and energy and oil and gas from United States. For India, that's not a good deal because, for one thing, the U.S. energy was much more expensive. India getting a big discount on Russian oil right now, and which they turn around and sell it to EU, who have to pay a premium. So if it doesn't make sense for them to buy more expensive American LNG, for example. So this is an instance where India is actually standing up for its own interests, but they realize it's time to repair the relationship with China. I don't think it's going to lead to like a honeymoon period per se. There was a brief period of India China honeymoon period back in the early 1950s called the Hindi Chini Bye Bye, India China brothers. That era is long gone. That's water under the bridge. What the two sides are probably looking to do is to have a détente, which means they will not necessarily be the best friends, but at least they're not overt enemies. They will continue the trade relationship. This is actually the kind of relationship that China has proposed, because China said, okay, look, we understand the border issue is a big thorn in our bilateral relationship. Let's just put that on hold. Let's shelve our disagreement and focus on areas where we can cooperate, because India and China, big countries, we have a lot of overlapping interests. But from India's side, up to this moment, they have been insisting, no, there's going to be no movement on any other bilateral issues unless the border issue is resolved. But then the border issue, the two sides stuck on border issue for since 1950s. I mean, since the founding of both countries, which is really a colonial legacy of British India when the British colonizer just drew a line arbitrarily on a map and say, okay, this is going to be the border between India and China, and both countries inherited that dispute, but they weren't able to resolve it successfully. One reason is because India insists on the British line, which China disagree, and in this respect, China inherited land border dispute, particular, with all the countries on its borders after the founding of People's Republic of China. As a result of the colonial border disputes, but China has managed to settle all its land border dispute. I'm not talking about maritime borders. There's still maritime border dispute in South China Sea, but on land, China has resolved all its border dispute with its neighbors, with Russia, Mongolia, Vietnam, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Myanmar. So the only standing land border dispute China has is with India and Bhutan. And Bhutan is because Bhutan's foreign policy is handled by India. So there's a common denominator here. And so that's why China says, okay, the border issue, we understand that's complicated. Let's move on to other area of cooperation. Looks like India now is gradually coming around to accept China's position, not on the border, but to try to improve bilateral relations in other areas, while continue the border negotiation.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and a wealth of information. That's why I always appreciate you having you on, because then I get all of the backstory and a little bit of history thrown in there as well. And interesting to look at this and to be reminded the fact that China's been saying all along, hey, this is how we should do things. India finally comes around. And I know it's been kind of coming around for a little while now, but you, of course, have the fact that Trump's got to get in there. He doubles tariffs on India, takes them to 50%. And as reports have noted, you got the Indian government estimating that these tariffs will impact over $48 billion worth of exports. So that's a big deal for India. But when it comes to the position they're in versus the position the US is in, and Trump, really wanting Modi to instead come to the US and tell him, oh, I'm so sorry, let's work something out, and have an EU style deal that Trump gets to brag about, pressuring them into. How do you view kind of US India tensions, where they stand right now, especially as Modi is headed to China? Do you think that Trump is sweating it at all?
I don't think Trump's sweating, because he's the man who brought the crisis. Because for a while, Modi and Trump had a bromance going, in Trump's first term and the beginning of Trump's second term. Modi was famous for going to Washington and saying MIGA and MAGA, it's all MAGA, right? But it's Trump that's slapping them on the face over the tariff. And you know what, Rachel, we should give that man a Nobel Peace Prize already, because he successfully managed to bring peace between the world's most populous countries. But that's also one reason that Trump is upset with India, because as a result of the Indian-Pakistan conflict a couple months back, Pakistan very publicly welcomed Trump's offer to mediate the conflict. And, Pakistan gave Trump the credit for implementing the ceasefire between Pakistan and China. And Pakistan nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. So Trump really liked that. Trump is a big ego guy. You just got to butter him up, and then you get whatever you want from him. I mean, the whole art of deal is a joke. Everybody can read Trump. But from India's side, they immediately rejected Trump's claim that he brought about the ceasefire. They say, no, Trump has nothing to do with it. We carried out our operation. We got everything. We achieved everything we wanted. It has nothing to do with Trump. So Trump was very upset. That man really wants a Nobel Peace Prize. And he was really upset that India publicly challenged his claim. And this is one reason now he's been particularly hard on India. Another reason is U.S. is getting desperate over the situation in Ukraine. They're trying to wrap up the conflict in Ukraine so U.S. can direct more resources to Asia Pacific to contain China. But they want to resolve the Ukraine conflict on the U.S. terms, which means, they still want to maintain Ukraine as a possible a proxy against Russia. They just want to freeze the conflict, have another ceasefire. But from Russia's perspective, they have went through the Minsk I agreement, Minsk II agreement, and all these ceasefire attempts have failed, because West never negotiated in good faith. So they didn't want a simple ceasefire. They want a permanent peace settlement. Now, I don't think Trump has come around to the realization that U.S. cannot dictate terms to Russia over how the peace is going to be shaped out post-conflict. So Trump is playing hardball. And the one way he's playing hardball with Russia is he's trying to trying to put the secondary sanction on purchase of Russian oil, and the largest purchase of Russian oil is China and India, and China already said, look, who we buy oil from is our sovereign rights. Nobody get to tell us what to do, and Trump can't put additional tariff on China because that would just bring us back to the bad days of May when both sides have over 100% tariff on each other's goods, and Chinese ships stop coming to the port of Los Angeles, and then it's sparking off a panic in the bond market. So the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had to run all the way to Europe to chase down Chinese Vice Premier for a trade ceasefire, for a tariff war ceasefire. So they're not going to do that, and additionally, China still have the U.S. by the balls by their control of the rare earth supply chain. China refines 90% of the rare earth, and even the rare earth that's mined in the United States, in the Mountain Pass mine in California, the largest rare earth mine in U.S., those whatever's get dug out of California is sent to China for processing because U.S. lacks a refining capability. So there's not much Trump can do about China. But whereas India has a weaker hand when it comes to vis-a-vis United States, and Trump being a bully that he is, bully do not try to confront the strong. They will try to bully the weak, and that's exactly what what Trump has done. Is trying to force India to bend the knee. But as I say, I give Indian leadership credit. They did not at least have a backbone, unlike the Europeans. So they're pushing back, and they're trying to repair their relationship with their fellow BRICS members. And the Modi attending the SCO summit. This is just the first step in the right direction.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's interesting to kind of watch that back and forth too. I'm glad that you bring up the point about China because, yeah, Trump has done what he can do there. And he's like, all right, who else can I bully, right? Europe fell too easily. That wasn't a fight for him. And so now he has to kind of move on to the next target. And when it comes to this upcoming summit in China, it's interesting because I know it's going to send a powerful message. Obviously, you've got leaders from India, Pakistan, Iran, all these different countries coming together. They're coming together for this summit that some of them are going to stay for China's victory over Japan Day. So how do you view the stakes of this summit? Is there anything really at stake here, or is this more so about a show of unity when it comes to everyone kind of looking over at the West and the US in particular?
Well, I think some substantive deal will be worked out on the side, with particularly between China and India, but also China and Iran. Because Iranian defense minister and Iranian president are coming to China, and Iran is also trying to gear up for a possible second phase of the Iran-Israel conflict, because Israel is really pushing for that, and Iran could get a lot of help from China in terms of shoring up its own defense. There's already widespread report of Iran purchasing China-made air defense systems, and China also supply a lot of vital materials for Iran to continue to make their missiles. The missile is one of the strongest Iranian method of defense when it comes to Israel, because Iran possess tens of thousands of missiles, and the Israel really have no answer for, because their air defense was getting overwhelmed, and they have problem to replace all these their depleted missile interceptors. So the one area to watch is what possible deal that Iran and China may be working together. And then of course there's Putin also visiting China. U.S. has been they had the Alaska summit, and one of the primary driver for the U.S. rapprochement with Russia is the so-called reverse Kissingering. They're trying to do another Sino-Russian split, right? They think they can maybe turn Russia against China. I don't think that's going to be successful, because first of all, Kissinger don't get the credit for Sino-Soviet split, because that split happened before Kissinger visit to China. Kissinger just exploited an existing condition. Right now, Russia-China relationship is very good. It's on very solid ground. It's actually based not on ideology, but based on mutual interests. Both Russia and China have very complementary economy. Russia is exporter of commodity. China is a consumer of commodities. Their bilateral relationship have its own momentum outside of the relationship with United States. So the whole reverse Kissinger is just complete fantasy. And Putin showing up in Beijing and also attending the China's Victory Day over Japan parade later, it just shows that the China-Russia relationship remains strong. And as you mentioned earlier, this showing of solidarity among these global South countries, it does present at least in the PR term, it presents a united front as an alternative to the U.S. dominated global world order.
Yeah, it's very telling, right? When you have all these leaders that are able to come together and then they look around and they go, okay, wait a second, what do we all have in common? Oh, the fact that the US is trying to go against all of us. And for countries like Russia and China, I mean, China has stood by Russia over the last 3.5 years as the US has taken us to the brink of World War III. Now you have the US wanting desperately to go after China, and I do not see Russia folding on them. I'm also curious too, because I know that when it comes to the economic angle here, ahead of this weekend's summit, Beijing's Commerce Ministry revealed that China's trade with other member states of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization reached a historic high in 2024 of $512.4 billion, marking a 2.7% increase year over year. China imported nearly $90 billion worth of crude oil, natural gas, and coal from other SCO members, along with over $13 billion worth of agricultural products. Okay, I say all of that to say that clearly there's a lot of trade that is going on between these members. China is a big factor in that. So when it comes to the US, going back to where we started, the US trying to basically wage a trade war against the entire world, how do you view kind of the state of the global economy right now, and how much countries like China are able to keep things stable or try to keep things stable when the US is all over the place, throwing tariffs all around the world?
Yeah, all the Trump's tantrum is just making China the seem the stable global, providing the stable global leadership. And China's trade during this whole phase of Trump trade war actually increased overall. China's export import numbers went up about 5%. Now people say, "Oh, those Chinese economic numbers are all fake." Look, it's very hard to fake import-export numbers because you involve multiple countries, and it's not just what you exported, but also other people who took in from their custom. Everything goes through custom. So, and this happened mostly because China has diverted its trade away from United States toward more global South countries. This was a strategy China adopted ever since Trump's first term, when Trump started slapping sanctions. So China had 7-8 years to prepare to decouple from the United States, whereas U.S. Donald Trump, the whole Donald Trump tariff thing, there was no preparation. There is no study on impact of how this will impact the U.S. economy and U.S. industries. Whereas China had been steadily building, they are doing the real decoupling. And you mentioned purchase of oil. China purchased 90% of Iranian's oil export. China also bought a lot of Russian oil in the recent month as well. So this ties China with these countries are very real. And this is something that Washington will be find very difficult to break. They couldn't even get India to pivot away from Russia. And China now is still the largest is still the largest economy that had the highest growth rate. I mean, right now, if you look at the whole world, the large economy that still have high growth rate, that will be China and India. And Russia. And so right now the BRICS, actually, among the total GDP of BRICS in the power purchase parity terms, is actually higher now than G7, and that trend is continuing. I mean, as U.S. continued to decline and trying to build walls around itself and its vassal states in Europe, the rest of the world is already moved on, and China is a clear leader in this pivot away from the U.S. global hegemony.
Yeah, it's like the U.S. has to be number one, so much so that it has to put down all of its vassal states, right? It can't help them out, and in fact has to hurt them. Meanwhile, you look at these other countries like China, India, and Russia, and they're going, okay, what mutually beneficial agreements can we come to between each other when it comes to trade to really save each other and ourselves from everything that the US is doing? I know that there is certainly a lot at stake here all around, and we'll be keeping an eye on what happens and what statements we get out of this weekend's summit. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Carl Zaw, a geopolitical analyst and host of the Silk and Steel podcast. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you, Rachel. Anytime.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also check out Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.